I'm Karen, 30, and my fiancé George, 31, proposed to me last March. We've been together for 6 years. He's my best friend, my partner, and honestly my biggest supporter. When he got down on one knee, it felt like everything just clicked. But as soon as I shared the news, my mom and my half-sister, Isabella, 24, turned my engagement and wedding into a personal battleground. My mom married my stepfather, James, when I was 5. Isabella is their daughter, and even though we grew up together, we were always more like tolerating acquaintances than true sisters. The problem is, Isabella has always had a strange competitiveness with me. It started when we were kids. She'd throw a fit if I got a better grade or if a relative complimented me. As we got older, the stakes just got higher. I went to college on a scholarship, while Isabella never even went. I've been with George for years, and she keeps jumping from one complicated relationship to another. And now that I'm engaged, she acts like my happiness is a personal vendetta against her. Anyway, George proposed last March during a quiet weekend at home, and we decided to get married in January. We wanted something small and intimate, a cozy ceremony with about 70 guests. It seemed perfect for us. I was so excited to start planning and thought my family would be too. Boy, was I wrong. When I called my mom to tell her the news, her first reaction wasn't excitement. It was, "Oh, Isabella isn't going to like this." I even laughed, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't. Apparently, my engagement was going to hurt Isabella's feelings. Why? Because she was single and trying to find herself. I let it go at first, thinking it was just a weird comment, but a few weeks later, Isabella announced she was getting married to a guy she'd been dating for 3 months. Look, I try not to judge other people's choices, but this felt wrong. Isabella had always been impulsive, but getting married after 3 months to a guy no one knew? It didn't seem right to me. But I kept my mouth shut. I thought, it's her life, her decision, and none of my business. Fast forward to July, Isabella's whirlwind marriage blew up as fast as it started. Her husband, Christian, cheated on her with none other than her best friend 2 months after the wedding. She filed for divorce. The whole situation was messy and heartbreaking, and I genuinely felt bad for her. I tried to be supportive, but every time I reached out, I got the cold shoulder. It seemed like she was mad at me, but I couldn't understand why. Then it hit me. She didn't want my support. She wanted to blame me. As far as I could tell, Isabella thinks I somehow triggered her rushed marriage, as if my engagement announcement was some kind of challenge she needed to win. And when her marriage fell apart, I guess she decided it was easier to resent me than to take responsibility for her own choices. By late autumn, things were tense. Isabella and I barely spoke since her divorce, and my mom was acting strange. Every time I brought up wedding planning, she'd get quiet or change the subject. It seemed like she was avoiding the topic, but I didn't push it. I figured she just didn't want to talk about weddings because of Isabella's situation. I should have seen the signs. Let me tell you, nothing prepares you for the sheer absurdity of being guilt-tripped over your own wedding. I thought planning a wedding would be stressful because of logistics or budget, not because my own family would turn it into a twisted competition. But here we were. It was mid-November, and George and I had just sent out our wedding invitations. I was super excited, finally feeling like everything was falling into place. That excitement didn't last long because 2 days later, I got the call. It was my mom. I remember finding it a little odd because she rarely calls me. She's more of a text once a month kind of person. But I answered, thinking she might want to chat about the wedding. I should have known better. The conversation started innocently. She asked how I was, how George was, and then casually dropped, "So, are you actually going through with the wedding?" At first, I thought she was just confirming the date or something. Yes, of course. Everything's ready. We've booked the venue, the caterer, the flowers. Most of it's already paid for. That's when she sighed. Not a normal sigh, a loud, exaggerated, dramatic sigh that practically screamed, "You are about to ruin someone's life." "Well," she said, drawing out the word as if she was about to bestow life-altering wisdom upon me, "I've been thinking about Isabella and I really think you should reconsider." I paused, genuinely confused. Reconsider what? She hesitated, as if bracing herself for a speech. "I just don't think it's a good time for a wedding, Karen." Isabella is still so heartbroken over her divorce. Having such a big celebration so soon after everything she's been through, it just seems a little insensitive. I honestly thought I'd misheard her. Wait, you think I should cancel my wedding because of Isabella? Well, yes, she said, as if it was the most reasonable request in the world. She's been through so much, and seeing you get married so soon after her divorce, it's going to hurt her deeply. I was stunned. I didn't even know how to respond. Mom, we've been planning this wedding for almost a year. The venue's booked, the deposits are paid. How can you ask me to just cancel? She didn't hesitate. You could always do something small. A church ceremony, maybe, just with immediate family. That way you still get married, but it's not such a big production. You wouldn't be flaunting it. Flaunting it? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, this isn't about flaunting anything. It's about celebrating my relationship with George. We've been together for 6 years. This is our day. She sighed again, heavier this time. I just think that if you truly loved your sister, you'd do this for her. She needs time to heal, and a big wedding will just make things worse for her. At this point, I was furious, but I tried to keep my voice even. Mom, I understand Isabella is going through a tough time, but this has nothing to do with her. George and I have planned this for so long. It's not fair to ask us to change everything because of her choices. She didn't like that. Her choices, Karen? She didn't choose to have her husband cheat on her. She didn't choose to have her life fall apart. Yes, but she did choose to marry a guy she barely knew after 3 months. That was the wrong thing to say. My mom completely lost it, accusing me of being cruel and selfish, of not understanding what Isabella had been through. She even pulled out a classic, "I thought I raised you better than this." At that point, I'd had enough. Mom, I'm not canceling my wedding. End of discussion. I hung up, shaking with anger. I immediately called George and told him everything. He was just as baffled as I was. Who asks their own daughter to cancel their wedding because of someone else's divorce? He said. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but of course it wasn't. In the following weeks, my mom escalated her campaign to guilt-trip me and make me cancel or downsize the wedding. She'd call me every few days, always with some variation of the same argument. Isabella is heartbroken. You're being insensitive. A small wedding would mean so much to the family. At one point, she even tried to get George involved. She called him directly saying, "You're such a thoughtful person, George. I know you'll understand why this is important to Isabella." Thankfully, he shut her down immediately, telling her we were sticking to our original plans. But then Isabella got involved. She started texting me passive-aggressive comments like, "Must be nice to have everything going perfectly for you, and don't you think it's a bit soon for a big celebration?" She even brought up the date, saying, "January seems like such a weird time for a wedding. Are you sure you didn't pick it to rub it in my face?" Rub it in her face? I couldn't believe the audacity. I tried to ignore her at first, but she only escalated. She started calling me, leaving long, guilt-ridden voicemails about how hard it was for her to even think about weddings and how my insensitivity was making her healing process so much harder. The worst part was how my mom and Isabella seemed to feed off each other. My mom would call and say something like, "Isabella cried all night thinking about your wedding." And then Isabella would text me the next day saying, "Mom's so upset about how you're handling this." It was exhausting. I was at my breaking point. I couldn't believe how far they were willing to go to make my wedding about them. I knew I needed to draw a line, but I wasn't sure how yet. This was the moment I realized how toxic their behavior was. It wasn't about Isabella's divorce or her feelings. It was about control. They wanted me to put my life on hold to cater to their insecurities, and I was fed up with letting them dictate my happiness. By December, things had officially spiraled out of control. Isabella was no longer content with being privately mopey or sending me passive-aggressive texts. She was now on a mission to badmouth me to anyone who would listen, and honestly, I was getting dizzy trying to keep up with all her antics. It started small. I learned from my cousin Taylor, bless her for being the family informant, that Isabella was calling relatives to warn them about me. According to her, I was flaunting my wedding in her face to humiliate her. She even claimed that I had chosen January on purpose, knowing it would be too soon after her divorce for her to emotionally handle. I couldn't fathom the logic. My engagement had been set months before she even got married, let alone divorced. How on earth was I supposed to predict her life falling apart when I was sending out save the dates? But logic doesn't seem to matter much when someone is determined to play the victim. Her stories got more dramatic each time she told them. Taylor told me Isabella was saying things like, "Karen always thinks she's better than me. She's just rubbing her perfect little life in my face because she knows I'm struggling." The worst part? Some family members actually bought into her narrative. My mom, of course, was her biggest cheerleader. She started calling me almost daily to ask if I had reconsidered canceling or downsizing the wedding. "Isabella is still so fragile," she'd say. "She cried all night after seeing your wedding invitations. You don't really need a big event. Can't you just do something simple?" I held my ground every time, but it was draining. The real breaking point came at a family Christmas gathering. George and I had been invited to dinner at my aunt's house, and I thought it would be a good way to de-stress after all the wedding drama. Of course, Isabella and my mom were also there, which should have been my first red flag. Things were tense from the start. Isabella barely acknowledged me, but every time I mentioned the wedding, she'd huff or roll her eyes. At one point, I was talking to my aunt about flowers, and Isabella loudly mumbled, "Must be nice to spend so much money on a party when some people can barely pick up the pieces of their lives." I ignored her, but it was obvious she wanted a reaction. Eventually, the conversation shifted, and I started to relax a bit. That is, until Isabella suddenly burst into tears in the middle of the living room. She was full-on sobbing, shaking her head and muttering, "I can't believe how cruel people can be." Everyone froze. My aunt rushed over to comfort her, asking what was wrong. That's when Isabella launched into her performance. "It's just so hard," she choked out between sobs. "I've been through so much this year, and now I have to sit here and listen to Karen talk about her perfect wedding like nothing else matters. She knows how much pain I'm in, but she doesn't care." And my mom immediately chimed in, rubbing Isabella's back as if she were the victim of some terrible injustice. "She's right, Karen. You need to be more considerate. You have no idea how hard it's been for her." That's when I snapped. I'd been holding my tongue for weeks, but I couldn't take it anymore. "This wedding has nothing to do with Isabella," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "George and I have been planning this for a year. If she's upset, it's not my fault. Maybe she should take some responsibility for rushing into a bad marriage instead of blaming me for her problems." The room went silent. My aunt looked like she wanted to disappear into the couch, and Isabella's tears immediately turned to rage. "How dare you?" she shot back. "You don't know what it's like to have your life fall apart. You've had everything handed to you, your scholarship, your perfect boyfriend, your perfect little life. You've never had to fight for anything." I stood up, shaking with anger. "You're right, Isabella, I don't know what it's like to have my life fall apart. But that's because I don't make impulsive decisions just to compete with other people. Maybe if you spent less time being bitter and more time working on yourself, you wouldn't be in this situation." At that point, George took my hand and said, "We're leaving." I didn't argue. On the drive home, I kept replaying the conversation in my head, questioning if I'd been too harsh. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had every right to defend myself. Isabella had been pushing my buttons for weeks, and I was fed up with letting her turn my wedding into her pity party. What really stuck with me, though, was how my mom jumped to Isabella's defense without hesitation. Not once did she try to understand my side or even acknowledge how much stress this whole situation was causing me. It felt like she had picked her favorite, and it wasn't me. The next day, I got a text from my mom. "You owe your sister an apology for what you said last night. She's been through so much and you were unnecessarily cruel." I didn't respond. I was done apologizing for things that weren't my fault. At this point, it was clear that Isabella wasn't going to back down, and my mom wouldn't stop enabling her. I didn't know what their next move would be, but I knew I had to start preparing for the worst. After the Christmas dinner disaster, I knew I needed to draw a very strong line. Isabella and my mom weren't just being unreasonable, they were actively trying to sabotage my happiness. Ignoring them clearly wasn't working, and any attempt to defend myself just seemed to fuel their drama. I realized the only way to move forward was to cut them out of the wedding entirely. This decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. 2 days after the dinner, I sat down with George and explained everything. I think I need to uninvite them, I said, a knot forming in my throat. They're just going to make things worse if they're there. George nodded immediately. I was thinking the same thing. It sucks, but this is your day, our day, and you deserve to enjoy it without worrying about their next move. Hearing his support made me feel a little better, but the thought of actually cutting my mom and sister out of my wedding was daunting. It wasn't just about them. It was about the ripple effect it could have on the rest of the family. Still, I knew I couldn't let their toxic behavior overshadow everything George and I had worked so hard to plan, so I drafted an email. I kept it short and to the point. I explained that their actions over the past few months, spreading rumors, blaming me, and creating unnecessary drama, made it clear that they weren't supportive of my wedding. I told them that their behavior had caused me significant stress and that, for my own peace of mind, I had decided to uninvite them. I hit send, and immediately felt as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Within hours, the responses started pouring in. My mom was the first to reply, and let me tell you, it was a bombshell. She called me insensitive and accused me of destroying the family. Her email was full of dramatic phrases like, "I never thought my own daughter would betray me like this," and "You chose a man over your own flesh and blood." She even threw in a line about how my father would be disappointed in me if he were still alive. Classic guilt-tripping tactics. I didn't reply. Next came Isabella. Her response was exactly what I expected, full of rage and self-pity. She accused me of being jealous of her, still not sure what I was supposed to be jealous of, and claimed I was punishing her for being honest about her feelings. She ended her email with, "You'll regret this when you realize you've destroyed this family." I didn't reply to her either. The fallout didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I started getting calls and texts from other family members, mostly those my mom and Isabella had already poisoned against me. My uncle called to tell me I was being immature and should let it go for the sake of family harmony. A cousin I barely speak to left a voicemail saying, "I can't believe you'd do something like this to your own mother." At first, I felt overwhelmed by the negative reaction, but then something amazing happened. The people who truly mattered started to support me. My father's sister, Aunt Marissa, called me to say she was proud of me for standing up for myself. "You've put up with their nonsense long enough," she said. "It was about time you stood your ground." My cousin Taylor, who had been keeping me updated on Isabella's antics, sent me a long text message saying, "Don't let them get to you. Everyone who truly knows you is on your side." Even my godmother, who is one of the most straightforward people I know, called to tell me I was doing the right thing. "Your wedding should be about love and celebration, not drama and bitterness," she said. Their support was like a balm to my soul. But, of course, my mom and Isabella weren't going to let it go. About a week after I sent the email, I got another call from Taylor. "You're not going to believe this," she said, sounding both amused and annoyed. "Isabella is telling people that you uninvited her because you feel threatened by her." I couldn't help but laugh. Threatened by what, exactly? "Apparently, she's claiming that you're worried George has feelings for her," Taylor said. "She claims he was flirting with her and you found out, so you're trying to get rid of her to save your own reputation." It was so ridiculous I didn't even know how to respond. We both knew there wasn't a shred of truth to anything she was saying. Still, it was annoying that she was trying to drag George into her web of lies. "That's just an act of desperation," I said. "No one's going to believe that." "Honestly, most people don't," Taylor said. "But you know how she is. She'll keep spinning the story until she finds someone naive enough to side with her." I decided not to waste any more energy worrying about Isabella's delusions. At this point, I was focused on protecting my peace and ensuring my wedding day went smoothly. To that end, George and I sat down to review the guest list and finalize all the details. We contacted the venue to make sure they'd support us if Isabella or my mom tried anything. We even hired some security guards to keep things under control, something I never thought I'd have to do at my own wedding, but here we were. Through it all, George was my rock. He reminded me that this was our day, and we didn't owe anyone an explanation for protecting our happiness. As New Year's approached, I felt like I was finally regaining control. Isabella and my mom could spin their narratives all they wanted, but they weren't going to ruin this for me. When January arrived, I thought I'd already seen every nuance of her envy, pettiness, and manipulative behavior. But what she tried to do next left me absolutely shocked and, honestly, a little disgusted. It all started with a weird text message George received one evening. We were sitting on the couch, finally relaxing after a stressful day finalizing wedding details, when his phone buzzed. He looked at it, and I noticed his face immediately shift from relaxed to tense. "What is it?" I asked, already bracing for drama. "It's Isabella," he said, showing me the message. The text read, "Hey George, I really need someone to talk to. I know you probably think I'm a terrible person right now, but I'm really struggling, and I feel like you're the only one who understands. Can we meet up?" At first, I didn't know how to react. I mean, on the surface, it seemed innocent enough. But knowing Isabella and how hard she'd been trying to stir up trouble, I had a bad feeling. George must have felt the same way because he didn't immediately reply. Instead, he turned to me and said, "I don't like this. It feels off." "Because it is off," I said. "She's never liked you. Why would she suddenly want to talk to you about her feelings?" We agreed it was best to ignore her, but the messages kept coming. Over the next few days, she sent George a series of increasingly desperate texts. She talked about how lonely she felt, how she had no one else to turn to, and how much she appreciated his kindness during such a difficult time. George had never had any kind of meaningful conversation with Isabella. He'd always been polite to her, of course, but they weren't close by any means. So, this sudden display of gratitude felt calculated. George was just as creeped out as I was, but we both decided it was best to wait to see what her endgame was before responding. And as expected, it didn't take long for her true intentions to surface. Later, George received another text, and this one was so blatant it made my blood boil. Isabella wrote, "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. I feel like we have a connection Karen doesn't understand. I don't know what to do about these feelings." I was furious, not just at her for being so brazen, but also at the sheer disregard of it all. She knew we were getting married in a matter of days, and there she was, trying to wedge herself between us with some cheap tricks. George, bless his heart, immediately showed me the message and asked, "How do you want to handle this?" I took a deep breath and said, "We're not going to give her the satisfaction of a direct response. Block her number, but before you do, screenshot everything." He did exactly that, and we saved the screenshots as proof, just in case she tried to invent some crazy narrative later on. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to let this go. I didn't reply to her directly. There was no point engaging with someone so desperate for attention. But I sent an email to my mom and a few other close family members, explaining what had happened. I kept it direct, attaching the screenshots and explaining that this was proof that I was right to uninvite Isabella from the wedding. "This behavior is toxic and manipulative," I wrote. "I've done everything I can to keep the peace, but this crosses a line, and I hope you now understand why I've excluded her." The responses were mixed. My mom, predictably, defended Isabella. She claimed I must have misunderstood her intentions and that I was overreacting. She even had the audacity to suggest that George might have misinterpreted the messages. "I can't believe you would accuse your own sister of something so horrible," my mom wrote. "Isabella is just going through a tough time, and you're making it all about you." I rolled my eyes so hard I almost hurt myself. At this point, I wasn't even surprised. But other family members were far more supportive. Taylor, my cousin, who had been on my side since the beginning, called me immediately after reading the email. "Are you serious?" she said. "I knew Isabella was messed up, but this is another level. Good for you for cutting her out." Aunt Marissa was equally indignant. "You are absolutely right to keep her out of the wedding," she said. "She has proven time and time again that she doesn't respect you, and this just confirms it." Their support meant the world to me, but I'd be lying if I said it completely erased the hurt. Isabella's ploy wasn't just disrespectful, it was demeaning. It felt like she was trying to undermine everything George and I had built together, and I couldn't understand why. Was it jealousy? Resentment? Some twisted need for attention? Perhaps all of the above. Whatever her reasons, I knew one thing. She wasn't going to win. With only a few days left until the wedding, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't let Isabella or my mom ruin this for me. I also made sure to double down on security measures for the big day. I contacted the venue and briefed them on the situation, letting them know that Isabella and my mom were explicitly uninvited. I even hired an extra security guard, just in case they decided to show up anyway. It felt a little extreme, but after everything they'd pulled, I wasn't going to take any chances. Now I feel more prepared than ever to face whatever nonsense they might try to throw my way. Isabella's dirty tricks may have shaken me, but they hadn't broken me. If anything, they'd only made me more determined to stand my ground and protect my peace. The morning of the wedding started beautifully. The venue looked magical, with all the flowers and decorations we'd chosen over the past year. The weather was perfect for our ceremony, and my bridesmaids kept me laughing and relaxed as we got ready. George and I had agreed to do a first look before the ceremony, so as soon as I was dressed, I headed out to meet him in the garden. The second I saw him standing there, looking just as nervous and excited as I was, all the stress and drama dissipated. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, and nothing else mattered. Or so I thought. About 30 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, I was back in the bridal suite making some last-minute touch-ups when my maid of honor, Zoe, rushed in. She looked distressed, which immediately set off my alarms. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Isabella and your mom are here." My stomach churned. What? How? I thought security was taking care of it. "They're trying to get in," Zoe said. "Security stopped them at the gate, but they're causing a huge scene." Of course they were. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What are they saying?" Zoe hesitated, which told me it wasn't good. "Your mom is crying and saying she just wants to see her daughter get married." "Isabella, well, she's screaming that you're a horrible person and that you don't deserve this day." I felt my blood begin to boil. It wasn't enough that they'd turned the months leading up to the wedding into a nightmare. They had to try and ruin the actual day too. "What do you want me to do?" Zoe asked. "Nothing," I said firmly. "Let security handle it. If we go out there, we'll just give them what they want." Zoe nodded and went back out to check with the guards. Meanwhile, I sat down and tried to compose myself. I could faintly hear my mom and Isabella in the distance, shouting and arguing with security, and it took everything in me not to go out there and give them a piece of my mind. A few minutes later, Zoe returned with an update. They're refusing to leave. The venue manager offered to call the police, but they're worried it'll cause an even bigger scene. This was exactly why I'd uninvited them in the first place. "Do you want me to tell George?" Zoe asked. I shook my head. "No, he doesn't need that stress right now. Just make sure they don't get anywhere near the ceremony." Thankfully, security was on the ball. They managed to keep my mom and Isabella contained in the parking lot, and eventually, the venue staff called a taxi service to take them away. But not before Isabella screamed loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "You'll regret this, Karen. You'll regret cutting off your own family." As soon as they were gone, I took another deep breath and told myself to let it go. They were out of sight now, and I wasn't going to let them steal my joy. The ceremony itself was everything I'd dreamed of and more. Standing there with George, surrounded by our closest friends and family, the ones who supported us at least, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. This was what mattered. Not the drama, not the bitterness, just this moment with the people who truly cared about us. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, I started overhearing some snippets of what had happened with my mom and Isabella. Apparently, they were shouting accusations at the security guards, saying I had been brainwashed by George and that the family would never forgive me for excluding them. A few guests even overheard them from the parking lot, which was embarrassing, but most people just rolled their eyes and ignored it. My father's sister, Aunt Marissa, came up to me during dinner and said, "I'm so proud of you for standing your ground. They showed their true colors today, and now everyone sees it." That was a common sentiment throughout the night. Cousins, friends, even some of my mom's old friends pulled me aside to tell me they were on my side. It felt like a collective reckoning. People finally realized how toxic my mom and Isabella had been, and they weren't going to tolerate it anymore. The rest of the night was a blur of laughter, dancing, and pure joy. George and I shared our first dance under twinkling lights, My maid of honor gave a hilarious and heartfelt toast, and my dad's best friend, who's practically an uncle to me, brought the house down with a story about how he once caught George trying to leave a family barbecue with a plate of ribs. When the night ended, I felt lighter than I had in months. Isabella and my mom hadn't won. Their attempts to ruin the day had only highlighted how much love and support George and I had from the people who truly mattered. When I got to the hotel that night, I checked my phone and saw I had a dozen missed calls and messages from my mom. I didn't bother to read them. I was done letting her, or Isabella, take up space in my life. Cutting them out completely was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, but standing there with George, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, I knew it was the right decision. About a week after the wedding, I got a call from my cousin Taylor, who, as usual, was the first to deliver the family gossip. "You're not going to believe what just happened," she said, sounding far more excited than worried. I sighed. "What is it now?" "Isabella and your mom had a massive fight," Taylor said. "Like an epic one. And get this, your mom kicked her out of the house." I almost dropped my phone. "Wait, what? What happened?" Taylor was more than happy to fill me in. Apparently, after the wedding, Isabella had been stewing at my mom's house, furious that her grand plan to ruin my day had failed. According to Taylor, she was blaming everyone. Me, George, the security guards, even some random cousin who apparently didn't try hard enough to stop me. The real explosion happened when she turned on my mom. Isabella accused her of not doing enough to stop the wedding. She started screaming that it was my mom's fault I went through with it, that my mom should have been more forceful in convincing me to cancel. My mom, who had always indulged Isabella no matter how ridiculous she got, finally reached her breaking point. Taylor said my mom yelled back, telling Isabella that she was tired of the drama and that she was an adult who needed to take responsibility for her own life. Isabella didn't take it well. She apparently had a complete meltdown, accusing my mom of failing as a mother and choosing me over her. It got so ugly that my mom finally told her to pack her bags and leave. When Taylor told me all this, I couldn't help but laugh. Not because I found it funny, but at the sheer irony of the situation. After months of my mom defending Isabella and taking her side, it all came back to bite her. "She actually kicked her out?" I asked, still trying to process it. "Yeah," Taylor said. "Isabella's staying with a friend for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if she comes crawling back in a few weeks." The whole situation felt like karma in action. In the end, their toxicity turned inward, and they ended up taking it out on each other. I wish I could say I felt bad for either of them, but honestly, I didn't. After everything they put me through, it felt like poetic justice. As for me, I've cut ties with both of them. I've blocked their numbers, muted them on social media, and made it clear to the rest of the family that I'm not interested in hearing about their latest antics. George and I are focused on starting this new chapter of our lives together, and for me, that's all that mattered now. Thanks for listening to Karen's story. Have you ever experienced similar family drama? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this story, please like and share this video to reach more people and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.